So for the first 11 days, I'm going to show my bill now. This is what I actually got charged. And remember, for the majority of this, I was actually on the VPP. I actually didn't take myself off the VPP. And what we see here is a bill of $39.69. Now, you'll see that this was essentially for about 2 weeks of membership with Amber. But with AGL, it was a set and forget. With Amber, I did have the challenge of having to visit the app regularly to find out, where the wholesale price was sitting at the time, when I could potentially feed in, when I would potentially use electricity at the cheapest rate and so forth. When I broke this bill down a bit, let's move to the next page. I found that there was a charge primarily at 50% of the bill at $17.70. And this said network demand charges. I started to wonder, what in the world is that thing, right? Because it took half my bill. What it ended up being is in my area for the wholesale provision, when I use electricity during the peak demand time, which for me was 6 p.m. to 9 p.m., guess what? I actually get charged a lot for that peak demand period. And in this case, I used 8.27 kilowatts and they charged $2.14. Now, I'm not saying Amber charged this. They didn't. It was actually the wholesale provider that charged this, but $2.14 for 8.27 kilowatts. And I then wondered, what in the world did I use 8 kilowatts for during the peak demand? Now, when I went to my home automation system, I use Home Assistant, and I started to implement this almost the same day I got the home battery. I was able to track down in detail that during about 6:30 p.m. on one particular night for about 15 minutes, I pulled in 8 kilowatts. And the strange thing was, I was on the actual VPP, Amber's VPP. So Amber's VPP should actually stop any type of peak demand charges during that time. So for me, the service provided by Amber didn't really work. I mean, I would have expected, being on a VPP, that, I wouldn't have to be importing from the grid during a peak demand window. I mean, that made up half the bill. The rest of the bill, I mean, we're talking about $13 or so. I mean, it's not too dramatic. It's actually much better than the AGL bill I used to get. But as I said, Amber just didn't work for me. So during the time, I was involved in other forums and EV groups and things like that. And I also joined the SIG Energy Home Battery Group. And I found out, essentially what the community says about different providers. Like a lot of people ask in those groups, I've got this sort of setup. What provider do you recommend? What works for you? What doesn't work for you? So, this is all essentially just general information and general knowledge. A lot of those people actually recommended GloBird. So at this point, I've given an opportunity to Amber. Didn't work out for me for my particular circumstances. Of course, it may work out for you. And I decided, okay, how about we go with GloBird? Now, one of the advantages of GloBird was also I have gas in the house, and I was able to also move across not only my electricity, but also my gas. And that's one of the things that Amber actually didn't have. AGL kept my gas and Amber had my electricity. So I had two different suppliers. And with AGL, I didn't really want to stay with them. I mean, essentially, I want one provider for both services. And that's what GloBird actually offered. So before talking about GloBird, let me just give a full financial disclosure. I am not affiliated with GloBird whatsoever. I don't work for them. I have a full-time job doing another thing. It's got nothing to do with the electricity environment. It's got nothing to do with electrical providers or anything like that. I'm just here as a normal consumer, just to share my experiences between the platforms and, between AGL, Amber, and GloBird Energy. So with that out of the way, I joined the GloBird Zero Hero plan. And essentially what that plan does is it gives you 3 hours of free energy a day from the grid between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. each day, each and every day. And it gives you a feed-in tariff between 4 p.m. and 11 p.m. every day of 5 cents. And you've got a super export feed-in tariff between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. each day, where they add an extra 10 cents. So essentially you're getting 15 cents for the feed-in between that period of time. And they also have an offer where if you don't feed in from the grid at more than 300 watts between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m., so essentially go into self-consumption mode on your battery, they give you an extra $1 every single day. And that's a great thing, because I use that every single day. And so far, I haven't missed a beat. I've never actually fed more than 300 watts from the grid between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. So I've been able to earn that extra $1 every single day. And lastly, for all other times, you essentially get 0 cents for the feed-in. So, essentially the only feed-in benefit for you is between 4 p.m. and 11 p.m. And finally, with the GloBird Zero Hero plan, they do give you a 1% plus a 2% discount on your bill when you set up direct debit. So for me, 3%, I set up the direct debit. And of course, I do have a bill eventually because of the gas that's with them. I mean, you can't get credits for the gas. So I do pay the gas bill through the GloBird system. But let's concentrate first on the electricity bill I got for the first 11 days at GloBird. So as you can see here, this is my GloBird bill received on the 20th of April 2026, and the amount due, $0. Let's go to the next page. And what we see here on this page is all the breakdown of usages, the daily charges, and so forth. So it's quite self-explanatory. Basically, a $1.50 service fee on the first 11 days at GloBird. That's $16.46. We got a peak usage charge there. Now, one thing I would note is during this first 11 days, I was actually learning how to automate the system in Home Assistant. Now, I did a couple of things. There's a couple of ways you can automate your system here. You can use the SigenStor app or your home battery application to import configurations and set them up based on the plan that you're on. So I could have done that with the SigenStor. I could have used the SigenStor AI. That's also a feature in the SigenStor. But because I had Home Assistant already in place, and I was having Home Assistant also do the charging of the EVs and turning on and off different things within the house, I chose to set up the home automation through Home Assistant. So, I was learning here and there. And during that period, of course, I had some peak usage bits and pieces here, some shoulder usage, but I've now automated the system so much that a lot of these wouldn't be expected in my next bill. So as I was learning, there's some faults here where certain things weren't as ideal as they should be. So what we can see here is, number one, we get a service fee charge of $16.46 for the first 11 days. We get a peak usage charge of 29 cents. And as I said, I expect that to be non-existent in the following bills because of the way I've set up the Home Assistant home automation system. We can see there also off-peak usage, $0. And now what I drew in for the first 11 days was 149.45 kilowatt hours during that period of 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Now that is a lot of energy to pull in and be charged nothing for it. Absolutely fantastic. And there we see the shoulder usage. I paid 61 cents because for some reason I was drawing in from the grid, usually at the time outside of the peak time. So we're talking there, that could have been during daytime, maybe, 8 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And there we see a super export top up. Now, this is where I automated the feed in between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. Now, they allow you only to export up to 15 kilowatts for that 15 cents. Anything you do after that, you get the 5 cents. So during that 11 days, and this was, of course, per night, I earned $7.72. And as we can see there, there's also some solar generation feed-in between the 4 p.m. and 11 p.m. That earned me $4.01. And there's also the feed in between 11 p.m. and 4 p.m. I fed into the grid 43 kilowatts and I got $0 out of that. And that happens, because it's outside of the 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. window. That's known to be 0 cents because there's plenty of green energy in the grid during those times. And as you can see, because I didn't use electricity between the peak demand window, that's the Zero Hero bonus. 11 days I did it straight and I was able to get $11. So my total bill for this particular 11-day period was $5.33 in credit. So I actually paid nothing and I actually earned $5.37 doing the things I did and doing it during the learning process. So I expect this to actually be much better on the following bill. I mean, my personal expectation, it could be $10, maybe up to $20 credit for a 2-week period.